what the date was that you arrived overseas and got into the combat area?
Oh boy, I've got it in my records, but I don't know. I can't remember it now.
Mid to late '44, or was it? I guess I'm curious. Like, did you fly? You talked about Patton. Were you actually flying when he was cutting across France? And
Yes.
and so you were already in country, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What what was it like at that time, assisting the infantry in the front lines moving forward? And
Well, there were several different armies moving in different directions at that time. And I stopped to look what you were doing there.
No, you're fine.
Okay. The main emphasis when I got into Paris and into France in that area was the fact that Paris had fallen just shortly before, and now it was time. Now the different army units in Paris, or in not Paris, not Paris. Yeah, Paris, the whole country. Yeah, I just thought it was only parts of. The whole emphasis and all the troops that were in Paris were to move forward as fast and as easily as they could to go to Germany, obviously, to get the war over with. So there were a variety of different armies moving in different directions. Like Patton was moving in one direction, and some other ones were moving in another direction, and so the ability for them to move and get forward determined on what they ran into and how many people were holding them back. In some areas, there were a lot of Tiger tanks, and a lot of other ones. There were other places So, in order for them to move, they would call in. It was set up that the Air Force people that would be involved in a variety of different ways to help the troops get forward. And we would bomb buildings, we would knock out anything that we could that was keeping them from moving forward. And a lot of times it was, in some armies they had a more difficult problems than others did. So that's why there were so many different P47 groups stuck all around the areas in different parts of all different parts of the war. And our particular organization was with was with a army that was going down in the southern part of France. Others were other places, and in our particular organization that I was in, we had to do an awful lot of work in knocking out buildings and those kinds of things, which required different kind of bombing for us, because we'd have to have either 500-pound bombs. In a couple cases, we had 1,000-pound bombs that we dropped, and that tells you even more about the P47. You could put 200-pound bombs under. We could put one bomb under each wing, and we could put other stuff underneath the airplane. And so it had a lot of different ways that we could help the troops moving forward. And what would happen is that we'd get up in the morning ready to go someplace. We'd go and get the word of where we were going to go and where we're going to go and how many ships we're going to fly. Sometimes we had 16 ships together to fly. Sometimes there was only 4 of us that would go. And so we would get near, we would know somebody like when you were leading a mission, well, you'd have to find your way to that front, find out where and we'd check in with usually somebody on the ground that was with the groups that were moving forward. We'd check in with the forward controller, we called him, and the forward controller said, "Hey, we're glad to see you guys. We need you. Do you see that bunch of stuff over there and across that little creek over there? You see all those things over there?" He says, "Yeah, we need to get those out of there. Can you help us?" And we'd do everything we could to help them. And we'd get down, and of course all of those areas had fighters, or we had people fighting back at us. And so almost every mission we run, there we've all kinds of fire coming back up at us, and it was difficult to get out without getting a lot of bullets coming after you, but that was part of the job, and so we had to continue to do it. But we worked out a deal. We found later on in the war that we were able to solve some of those problems later on in the war, but in the beginning part of it, it was the best way we could get down and help those people were the way we did it, and they were sure glad to see us come through there. But as we moved forward, as the whole war moved forward, we found ourselves with a lot of we were getting hurt pretty bad. We were losing people, and we were getting airplanes shot down and so forth. But we found the best way to solve that problem was to have somebody get down with the forward control people that was was a pilot or somebody of a pilot type of person who knew a lot about airplanes. And what they would do is when the forward controller would want to call in a flight to bomb something, then we would have the Air Force guy with the forward group down there, because he could contact the pilot that was bringing the group in and say, "Hey George, when you make your run, make it from south to north, because you won't go over the German fire coming after you." And because the Army guys weren't that knowledgeable to know that if an airplane came down from north to south and turned west, you were going over the enemy. If you'd turned east, you'd have gone away from the enemy and so forth. So they weren't always as knowledgeable about it. So by doing that, we saved ourselves getting an awful lot of people killed and a lot of less airplanes lost. So it worked out real good. But it was kind of interesting if you were a fighter pilot and now you were down in the front lines in a tank, riding along in a tank. And I'll tell you, I went down one time, and I was with the forward controller in his tanks, which usually was where they were, and we went around a little bend, and all of a sudden I heard bing, ding, 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 and I said, "Is that what I think it is, Colonel?" He says, "Yeah." He said, "That was he said, "That's small arms fire." But he says, "If that's small arms fire, there can't be much, but," he says, "there's got to be something else behind it." So about this time, he turned his tank in around a bend, and we looked over around the corner there, and there around a little lake over there was two great big Tiger tanks sitting over there, and they had their snouts looking right down that way, and if we had gone around that bend, we were dead soldiers and pilots by that time. So I said, "Well, we'll get those guys out of there for you, Colonel." He says, "Okay." And so I called in the flight, and I told him what the situation was. I said, "These tanks out there," and I explained everything to him, but I told him which way to turn, which way to come in, and which way to get out, and so forth, because there was some other light people shooting from behind them there. And what was so funny about this one was that when the flight came in, and I think there was, in this case, I think we had about, I think we had 2 flights of 4. So we had eight people to go after those things. And so they came down and everybody made their run, dropped their bombs, and bombs started going off. And what was so funny about one was that the 2 tanks with the snouts were sticking out from a building that would look like a building back there. And when the bombs went down in the area, you saw all kinds of stuff flying all over. What was happening was that the Germans were trying to camouflage their tanks, and so they were putting them in a alongside of those houses down there, and there was a lot of manure. So they were hiding them in the manure, but just the snout sticking out, and manure was flying all over the area at that time like that. But the tanks were taken out and they were gone. They were gone, and the colonel says, "Well, give your boys my thanks a lot." He says, "We can move out of there." He says, we got moves to get moving out of here. And he and his groups took off, and away they went. And it hadn't been for that tanks.
When was it that happened? Do you remember?
No, it was one of the millions that I had. It seems like we did so many different things, and we had so many different. We had all kind of. Sometimes some of them were fun, some of them were not so fun. But the fun ones were ones like where we would, in the morning, when you get up in the morning, you'd go out and look up and take off real quick and look down over into Germany and see if you saw any smoke. If you saw any smoke, you went like hell for that smoke, because that meant that the German was because of the fact that we had so much seniority. I have to fix this one up. Because we had support.
You talking about air superiority?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because we had air superiority, the Germans had to move everything mostly at night, because anything going on the ground during the day would be so many of our people running around, they didn't have a chance. So we'd go real fast as we could and see if we could get to that train before it got into a tunnel. And then if you could, that we could knock out the head end of it real easy. We could blow up a boiler with those guns that we had on our airplane, and then once the airplane once the train was stopped, then we could get down and knock off all the stuff that was on it, which was usually supplies and bullets and things that they needed up front. So that was a good job to do. And we even got to the point where, even if they got into the they were trying to get into the I'll talk about where train goes in a tunnel. Okay. The trains were trying to get into tunnels so that they thought they were safe from us, but we finally found a way, after knocking about 15 tunnels in pieces, how we could send a bomb in the tunnel. We could skip one into the tunnel, and that was pretty tricky. If you'd come down out of the sky with 2 500-pound bombs on, and then trying to send them into the tunnel right in front of you without you going into the tunnel with it or up on top of the tunnel. So that was always a little different kind of do, but we found a way to do it.